Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me in episode 67 of AppScan Tuesdays. And today it's a special episode following a comment that was in one of the previous videos that we had. There was a request to show how to use AppScan Enterprise with large organization, large enterprises, how to build, have a good folder structure, import scan results, and all sorts of requests. This video we will focus on the first one on how to build a folder structure in the ASE and the things that you need to consider doing that. In order to help me with this session, I'm bringing Ravi again to the show. Hi, Ravi.
Hey, Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming again. Ravi was with me on the show exactly 30 episodes ago, and I'll include the video on Ravi's sides there. It was about REST APIs with AppScan
Right.
Enterprise. And
That's true.
today I got him to come and help us again. So thank
Yep.
you for that,
Good to be
Ravi.
back here, Ethan. Thank you.
Sure, and we may have a series of a few episodes to go over the other items
Yes.
also that were asked. And it's a great opportunity for me to say again for the audience, if you have topics that you want to us to bring to the show, put them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to do that. So, Ravi, let's jump into the topic because it's a lot of explanations this time more than demos, right?
That's true because it's a very subjective topic, and yeah, it's more of theory. But then, as and when needed, if you have any queries, we can quickly jump into AppScan Enterprise and see how that's achieved. So yeah,
Yeah. And before we start, Ravi and I had a discussion on how to name this session. Good folder structure or efficient. The thing is, as Ravi told me, there is no good or bad. It really depends
yeah,
on the organization. What's good for one isn't necessarily how others would want to do it. And AppScan Enterprise gives you the flexibility. We'll touch more on the memory efficiency, performance efficiency areas, and maybe a little bit best practices, right?
sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let me quickly share my screen because we have few bullet points that would help to. Okay, so when it comes to creation of folders, like Ethan mentioned before, there's no hard and fast rules as such on how it should be. It's very similar to how we would create a folder structure in the Explorer of, say, Windows, right? It's very similar to that. But then we again we cannot just randomly create folder structures. So what are the guidelines or what should be the things to consider when we do that is what we'll be trying to cover in this session, right? So few of the uh, few of the reasoning in how the folder structure should be maintained boils down to the organizational structure itself, right? So in some cases, the organizations have lesser number of application and there are few team members. So the way they would organize the structure of the folders would be different from an organization that has many number of users, huge number of users who are on and off teams, and they get access or they need to be given access on transitionary basis and not on permanent basis. So there the structure would vary for them. In some cases, organizations, if they're trying to maintain the security issues for multiple applications or multiple business unit, the way they would want to structure would be slightly different. So in short, it basically boils down to how organizations are themselves structured and what's the preferable mode for them to organize it. So one other consideration, apart from the organization itself, is who are the administrators who are maintaining these teams or folders for AppScan Enterprise for the organization. When I say maintenance, what I'm referring to in the context of folder structure is how easy or difficult is it for the administrators to provide access to the end user for specific folders or specific folder items within that, right? So invariably, what we've seen is it boils down to the scan page loading problem is something that we seen in the past, and when we look at it, it primarily boils down to the number of artifacts that are stored within the uh, AppScan application. When I say artifacts, they could be templates, the number of templates that's there, the number of folders those are created, the number of scan jobs that are created, and report packs. These primarily constitute the artifact that's stored inside. It's generally recommended that the parent folder, that's the landing page when the user moves to the scan tab directly, is recommended to have less than 100 folders in the base root hierarchy, right? So the question could be, why do we even need to have 100? But then, like I said, it basically boils down to how the organization has split their preference of how they want to handle. They could be handling per application basis, and they're organizations where there are more than 3,000 to 4,000 applications. So if the applications are then put on the root folder itself, then the loading of the scan tab could be slower for some users who don't have access to all the folder items, right?
I
So
think
it's
Ravi,
best. Yeah.
I think
Hmm.
Ravi, what you're saying is when a large enterprise organization starts, often they will simply start by creating some applications and scanning them, and if they don't stop soon after that and realize that they need to split it to subfolders and, as we said, business units, then very quickly it will become a mess and all the applications are in the root folder, which is both hard to manage, but in this case we're talking about performance and the
Right,
effects. So it's
right,
okay when you try it out with AppScan Enterprise,
right.
or if you're a small company with a few dozens of applications. But once you're bigger than that, definitely don't create applications on the root folder. Don't do it that way.
That's true. That's true. Very true. Very true. Yeah. So it's not just about the application itself. I mean, it's again what kind of logical construct. For
Yeah.
example, though we have a users folder, sometimes the organizations prevent or they would want to have the user getting listed directly under the ASE folder. So they have automation running that when the user is created, create a folder item in the base. So
Hmm.
it's again fine as long as the number of users are less than 100, but then it could, you never know, they get acquired or they grow. And like you said, you don't predict it in the beginning, but then eventually you can always grow, and then the number of folders again increases if that's the structure they follow. But yeah, most likely it's what you mentioned. That they start off with small number of application, but that can get blown up quite soon. It's also a best practice to prevent the having multiple levels of subfolders. So it's better to keep it under 10 again, like in case you have a structure which needs you to create subfolders, which is very much possible, right? For example, some organizations prefer to have a hierarchy where the scans are organized according to, say, a month or things like that. And you can get easily carried away creating
Hmm.
subfolders for then the day. And then so when we say that the root folder, it's best recommended not to have more than 100 items. What we mean is what comes directly under the AAC root, because the moment the user switches to the scan tab, it first looks for what access it has to the root folders on this page. So having thousands of folders here or hundreds of thousands of folders here can cause slowness while loading of these applications. So it's best recommended that you have some kind of a logical grouping uh, under the root folder, and which limits the number of folders under the root folder to be less than 100,
Yeah.
right? So the other thing that we said was in terms of subfolders. So like I said, when I say a subfolder and have logical grouping that's less than 8, what we meant was basically under this, if you have, let's say, a subfolder 2 and so on and so forth, it's better uh, to limit that under 10. What happens in AppScan Enterprise is if you assign a user or a user group specific access to the base folder, right? You have options which allow these to trickle down to all the subfolders as well, right? Which may be something that's needed in case of some organization. In some organization, they may not want to do it. So it boils down again as to how you invariably provide access to users, right? For example, some may even organize the folders based on the user type itself. For example, security analyst, the scans that they need to run might be organized into one folder, and you may want to assign all the security analysts in the organization access to that folder, which so then what you can do is you can create a logical grouping in LDAP and just assign that logical grouping all the access. That way you don't even have to select individual users and assign access to them, right? So maintenance becomes much more easier when it comes to that. But yeah, this is something to be considered. Is your normal day-to-day work or involves assigning permissions to folders based on a group of users or users, and is it all to all the subfolders, or do you have to keep adding exception that yeah, I mean majority of these users can get added, but 20 of them should not get access and things like that? Then it becomes a nightmare if you're not talking about having a logical structuring. So if that kind of a decision can be made early, it helps maintenance also easy. Permissions are allocated at the folder level, and it trickles down to all the objects within this particular folder. And there's also flexibility to let that permission percolate down to all the subfolders. For example, for this folder, if I want to give access to a user or a group, I just have to select the base folder, provide a specific type of access. So most of the access is driven based on two parameters. One is the user type itself, whether the user is an administrator user, a standard user, or a quick scan user by default.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, for the from the folder access permissions, we can provide some of these specific roles for that particular user. It's not just about the role of the user itself, which gives the default permissions, but also the nature of what operations this particular user can do on the folder and folder items, right? For example, a job admin would mean access to everything, all the artifacts within that particular folder or subfolders if we assign that apply to subfolder item permissions, whereas report admin can do work on any of the report packs, configure reports, create new reports, or play around with that, but not anything to do with the jobs as such, right? Use a standard user. So once I apply it, it has, and if we want it to percolate down to all the folders, subfolders within that, I have that option to allow it for all the sub items. So what happens is it would override the permission for all the subfolders. If there was an exception allocated for this user, that would get overridden. Okay, so the next point we have is about the templates. So it is recommended that we have we do not exceed, let's say, more than 200 templates. So AppScan Enterprise by default, it provides multiple templates that can be edited or reused, or they could be copied and templates created based on the organizational requirements. It's honestly, we've not seen a huge number of templates created, but what happens is invariably, whenever we run the configuration wizard for making modifications to any configuration, it could be like changing of password or any other parameters which is related to AppScan Enterprise. At the end of it, we get the initialization wizard, right? And if we select the initialization wizard and again run that through, what happens is at the end of it, it would end up creating about 20 templates, which is nothing but a copy of what's there for that current release, right? So it's better not to run that at the end of running config wizard if it's between a release itself. And unless there are template changes which gets advertised for any new release, if there's no need to upgrade the templates, it's not even necessary to run the initialization wizard at the end of even an upgrade. So that's one way to ensure that we do not create multiple duplicate templates. As you can see on my screen, you can see that we have these templates here, right? And these have another template with the same name, same version number, and an underscore one. This means that it's been run once again after the configuration wizard was run and initialization wizard was executed. At some point of time, again, we have run it, and hence it's created these duplicate entries. That's not necessary. In fact, these both of these are duplicates that can be removed, right? So here you can see that though we've run it twice, uh, the count of templates here is 78, right? So if we have upgraded across releases And in between releases, if you run the initialization wizard, this number can quickly grow up and go to something like 300 or 400 very easily, and it's not required. So coming to the next item, which is keeping the number of folder items minimal, right? So in AppScan Enterprise, more than the number of folder items, because you could have thousands and hundreds and thousands of folder items. When I say folder items, a combination of scan jobs and report packs and dashboards and things like that. More than the number that you see there, what happens is for each of these, there are multiple objects that's created in the database. So the database size can inflate over a period of time if we do not regularly ensure that what's not needed is cleaned up, right? And if we can, it's a best practice to actually clean up scan jobs or reuse of scan jobs if that does the purpose instead of creating new scans every time.
Not just for the database and the performance, but to manage those things, to look at it. I mean, you want to work, you want to spend most of your time working on the current situation and not something that happened in the past, not try to look and search for another folder, for another scan. Having a mess while the system allows it makes it much harder to manage.
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of backtracking then you would have to do from the application back to which scan this came from and things like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Very true. Okay, which brings us to the last 2 points, which are kind of related, which is periodically delete the old and unused scan jobs, right? This helps to trim not just the database as well as improve the performance on the UI front as well, because there's no drilling through multiple scans for permissions and things like that. And when we say this could again depend on organization, how you define periodically, right? Definitely, it's not something you would want to do on a daily basis, but anything like every 6 months or to every year, things like that, because we do provide some kind of what we call as Perth scripts. Currently, it's external, but we'll be productizing that as well, which actually helps the organization to delete or clean up jobs which are older than a specific period of time or a date range for that matter, right? Yep, and similarly for the folders as well, because what we've seen again is based on the experience, and that happens more with the automation, if I may say so, because there could be some kind of a logical error that cost creation of multiple folders, but there are no scans within that. But then, yeah, while loading it on the UI, because there's a folder, the permission needs to be checked. That can slow it down. So it's always better to look for folders that do not contain any scan jobs and periodically clean them up as well to reduce the overhead while loading of the UI as such.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maintenance becomes easy. Yep.
Thanks, Ravi. This looks good, very informative. Let's go back to bring you back, and then we can wrap it up with some conclusions.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi, for this very thorough description. I'll admit, when I saw the comment, I didn't think that we will have so much to talk just about this folder structure.
Yep.
But then again, large organization, they have a lot. They may have a lot of constraints, a lot of complexities, and
That's true.
changes as they progress. One of the key elements, maybe people need to remember, it's not just loading, as you said at the beginning. It's not just loading
Right.
of the folders or files. The flexibility that we allow in AppScan Enterprise makes it harder for us because we need to evaluate that they have the permission in each folder. So
Right.
there are a lot of queries on a lot of items. You need to be more organized to be able to be efficient with it.
That's true. That's true.
And of course, um, if you didn't get it right the first time, okay, we can.
We can move things up. Yep.
Yeah, you don't need to start from scratch. You definitely don't need to
Right.
delete and start a new machine. Everything is
That's
doable, just a little bit more focused, and you try it again, and it will be
right.
much more efficient after that. Cool.
That's true.
So thanks very much, Ravi. This was very good. Um,
Yep.
until next time, hopefully we'll have you
Yep.
again talk about the other items that were asked. So
Definitely. Yep.
bye
Thanks,
bye.
Ethan.
Bye
Bye for
everyone.
now.